Awesome. Thank you, John. So the purpose of this meeting is we're gonna have a very large board meeting on Monday with a lot of items on the agenda. And there are a few things that I wanted to point out in addition to talking through kind of a little bit of a budget workshop to get prepared for our trim meeting, which is happening right after our 3 o'clock meeting. I wanted to utilize this time not only for budget workshopping, but also to be able to go through this agenda. Those of you that are on the call are going to have a big part in the agenda. So I just kind of wanted to review it with everyone. Given that it's such a lofty agenda, oftentimes the culture of this board is they deliberate and debate a lot because they haven't necessarily come to our workshops. So I wanted to take this opportunity to go through it so that our chair, Maville, and our vice chair, Sylvia, can make sure that we are pushing the meeting along, because we've got a lot to cover within 2 hours before we get to our budget meeting. So with that said, a couple of things that we are going to try to highlight. The first thing is going to be our tentative apportionment presentation. Dan, do you kind of want to talk through a little bit about what you're planning to do on Monday, and then talk about the comment that we had from the resident?
Sure. I'm not sure if you want me to go through the full presentation.
Oh, no. This is just this is the Cliff Notes.
Sure. This is the same apportionment model that we've been briefing since, for months now. Nothing really has changed to it other than the same briefed adjustment to the recreation benefit percentage is up to 70.6%, which allows us to get more money from the county. I briefed Mr. Maville yesterday on the phone a little bit when going over this presentation, but we did receive the one complaint via email because his property stretches the full width of the island from beach side to bay side, and his house is more situated towards the bay side, and so he didn't feel that he should have to pay storm protection benefit assessments. But we responded as an office by showing him, the study. It also takes into account for land loss, backfill, armor, and while he wasn't happy with the explanation, he understood the explanation, and we haven't heard from him since.
Right. So do you anticipate then, Dan, that we may have some more individuals from the public, like, for example, the treasurer of the board from the Civic Association? Like, are we ready to discuss, some of the issues that we've heard in terms of her issue, which was regarding being exempt? Are we ready to address that?
Well, I don't know if they've been exempt, but since the end of the previous meeting we had on the June 28th, that didn't really count. It's kind of like a practice run. We've looked through the economist study, and it says in there that the institutional properties are to be treated as residential in that study. So we've run it accordingly with minor adjustments to, you can't really see the screen here. I don't know if I should screen share real quick.
Yeah. Can you give me screen share capability?
I have it. I'm just
great. Do we have anybody
finding the button. Sorry.
No worries.
Daniel, this is Renee. Are you saying that there was a discussion to take a currently commercial property, which is not for profit, and treat it as residential? Is that residential with homestead or straight residential?
Those are the institutional properties, and that would be straight residential. And it has been that way since the economist study. It wasn't implemented in the numbers that way until I believe this is the same one, because I haven't updated this PowerPoint, but we haven't.
We saying that prior beach renourishments, they were treated as residential.
Right, this is how they were treated with the 2014 project as well.
Okay, so there's already a legacy of that. All right.
Correct.
These are the properties here.
I also want to note that Commissioner Mullins is joining us. Hi, Mike. Thank you for being here. Just to reiterate really quickly for Mike, this purpose of this meeting not only is to have a bit of a budget workshop, but really I wanted to utilize this time to go through our agenda for Monday. As I have Apton on the call, I've got Nicole Sharp, and I have Tom Piero as well on the call, because there's going to be some things that everybody on this call is going to need to address for us. And what I'm trying to do is, because it's such a hefty agenda, is alleviate a lot of the debate during the meeting so that we can just kind of push this meeting forward, because we have a trim meeting that starts at 5.
Okay. Yeah, Jennifer, forgive me. Hey, Mike, welcome. So Dan, to finish the question, what is the delta or difference between the residential assessment of said properties versus the commercial? What are we talking?
So on here,
If you
I'll
could just
let
tell me the number, yeah. My internet connection is unstable. Sorry.
Okay, so with the total of the 11 properties, if they're treated as residential, their total assessments would be $181,000 roughly. If they were treated as commercial, they would have been 397,000. So there's about a 270,000
200,000.
gap.
Jesus.
Yeah. So one of the
Okay.
things,
And
one of the things we need to note, Chairman Bill, is that I did receive a phone call from the treasurer of that board, Lisa. What's that name? Lisa Reardon. Lisa Reardon, who, talked with me about her strategy, because she's really pushing that we go back to eliminating them from any assessment because of their nonprofit status. So I just, kind of wanted you all to be prepared for that and how you're going to respond to it. I like what you said, Chairman Bill, about the precedent already being set in the previous project.
right.
I think that's something that Commissioner Mullins also pointed out in an email exchange after our last meeting when we talked through. So I think that's a great point, is that we set precedents with the last project. And, this individual and others may ask that we go back to the nonprofit status, or eliminating them because they are a nonprofit, and that can be potentially your response. But I just want everybody to kind of be prepared for that if it comes up.
Well, that's a big hit, 396,000.
Right.
So, so you're saying that the past renourishments are just 2014?
2014, and I think
And prior to that, what was it?
Commissioner Mullins could probably speak to this, Mike. In terms of the previous renourishment, that we charged them as a residential, not as a commercial, correct?
I'm missing a little context here. Could you explain the context so I can answer the question?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I'm trying to go through each agenda item so we can anticipate questions from the public.
Right. That I get. Yeah.
Yeah, and so the question here, or what I'm trying to educate everybody is that I did receive information and a phone call from this individual on their board, the Civic Association, who wants the board to go back to not charging nonprofits for the assessment. And so, well, and that's true. So I just think for historical purposes, during the 2014 project, we did charge them a residential rate. And that's what we're doing this time, or recommending this time. And I can't speak to previous before 2014, really. So maybe if you have some history on
Okay, I get the context now. So let me answer the question if I may. Yes, in prior periods, prior to the 2014 nourishment, not-for-profits, particularly the Civic Association, were not assessed. And the board had evaluated back then and decided that, for example, the Civic Association, people come to their art fests and their other potluck suppers and whatever else it may be, and have an opportunity to take advantage of the beach, as well as employees and people who come to the library and so on. So the decision was made then unanimously by the board that they should pay something. And historically, the precedent for CEPD has been that everybody pays something. And so they came up with a number which was not that significant. It may have increased this time because it's institutional, but the board pretty much agreed unanimously to assess all properties except for the county or the government properties outside of Captiva. And I think the fire department doesn't get assessed either. So it turns out that the not-for-profits were assessed, and there was an objection raised by a number of people, and one of the objections was raised by the Civic Association. And at the time, the board, I made several motions to discuss and try to resolve these objections to the assessment, and none of my motions were seconded. And Chairman Boyle at the time was shaking his head the whole time, communicating to the rest of the board that he didn't want to have a discussion on them. I made very strong arguments that we should discuss each and every objection or category of objections. So in the end, that objection was not considered. So it stood. And my feeling is that, you know, the board has to make that decision now. Do they want to reverse that or stick with the policy that was established in precedent in the last meeting that every property owner pays something? So that's something the board's going to have to decide. Now, it could also be left for now, so we move the ball forward and considered with whatever evidence is being provided that they're saying not-for-profit shouldn't have to pay. And that can be done over the next year before the final apportionment is completed, probably the end of 2022 or even into 2023. Does that answer your question, Jennifer? I'm not sure.
Yes, we just wanted some context surrounding it because again, you know, we just want to prepare in case the public comes to the meeting and asks us these questions.
Sure.
So being able to have that historical background, I think is very helpful for staff. I know for staff.
If you could leave this spreadsheet on, I had a question concerning this.
Yeah.
And I had asked Dr. Strong to do some things. I don't know if he did it or not, but you notice on the left hand, on the lower section, commercial properties, the actual dollar amount was as is 1,405,991 and went down to 1,009,000. Can you explain what made that happen, Dan?
I'm sorry, I'm trying to see which section are you?
Well, you have institutional properties in
Page
the
21.
section, highlighted estimated assessment totals for the institutional properties. And on the left, you say commercial, institutional, residential, and residential homestead. You put the dollar amount for each one. And then on the right, it says move to commercial category. So it looks like commercial properties moved to commercial category and went down in the process. Is that right?
Okay, so what that is showing the left column is the as is, like if we were treated it as the models ran right now. And the right side is a hypothetical if the institutional properties were moved back to the commercial, you know, for comparison's sake. You can see the commercial properties went down $396,000.
Okay, let me try to understand that. So the assumption is by putting more properties into that category, you're still looking at the same benefit for the total category, and therefore it lowers a portion of it for the commercial properties. Do I have that correct?
Correct. So if in this case,
Hold on, I got to get a
numbers
second question.
wrong.
Is that correct, my interpretation of that?
what I understand what you're saying, yes, it is.
Okay, because Dr. Strong, and I don't see this evidence here, Dr. Strong at one point had said that he had a different way of looking at it, which would have increased the allocation to commercial properties. And I don't know if that's included in the spreadsheet you're using. We could consult him on that. But I also think that with the mucky duck, even with the change to increase.
Right now, for 300 Gs.
Renee, you're interrupting the meeting, sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah,
My
anyway.
button's
so
on, I'm sorry.
Okay, basically, what we've seen with the mucky duck as a an example of how commercial properties are so undervalued. In general, that's been my experience all along, that the separate department in the property appraiser's office that evaluates commercial properties tends to way undervalue them. The Green Flash was valued at 25 cents on the dollar of Jeff Brown's house that was a couple hundred feet away. The mucky duck was valued at less than $1 million, and 5 feet away, not 5 feet away, but 5 properties away or a couple hundred feet away, there were properties that were valued, Dan, you know what I'm talking about, but were probably valued about $8 or $9 million, certainly significantly higher than the mucky duck. So I had asked Dr. Strong to take a look at that, and he said, well, he had done something and he wasn't sure it was reflected in this. But furthermore, I think that the board has the authority, recognizing a lot of people come to the island for commercial property use, to look at a separate additional assessment or if you will, an excise assessment to the commercial properties to get them to carry their fair share. So I think that's something that I would argue, if I'm going to authorize personally the apportionment, if I'm going to vote for it, I want it to be more fair to residential properties. And this basically is way out of balance relative to the commercial properties versus the residential properties.
So in this scenario, what would you be suggesting that we use as the standard value? Because the commercial properties have a millage rate of 10.9999,
Yes.
and it's about three
Well, one
times
thing
the
is to say that
residential.
if institutional folded in there, that, I think it's the issue is what benefit they're getting and how they're calculating that benefit. And again, I would reach out to Dr. Strong because he said that he was looking at the total value of just say hotels and whatever, and he had another way of looking at it so that there was a bigger number that was being used times that millage rate. And I don't remember the details. I mean, if we had him on the phone, I'd be happy to join a conversation with him on the phone to try to refresh him of that and see that we get the correct thing there. But I would also say the board has the authority. I don't know if Ralph is not on the call today, is he?
No.
Okay, well, I believe the board has the authority to say, look, we think that they're getting a lot more benefit and we need to calculate that benefit and increase it to be fair. And I think Renee has brought up the subject in the past and other members have, that in various other communities, the resorts pay significantly higher percentage of beach nourishment and because they bring in so many people to get so much benefit of it, and that the residential properties are carrying too much. And so they've been changed in other communities to basically add a special, I call it an excise, but a special assessment on top of that to commercial property. So Renee, do you know what you were talking about with resorts? You were saying they pay half or all of the assessments. Renee?
Yeah, sorry, I had to unmute. I don't recollect the specifics. I do remember a couple of things. One was that, which doesn't have anything to do with this discussion, is that in the Outer Banks, they get the tourist tax. They basically get 30% of it, end of discussion, and there's very little left to pay from the commercial and the residential entities. I did mention that. And I think Nicole is aware of that situation because she deals with the Outer Banks and does the renourishments there. And I forgot the gentleman's name, but insofar as, like you mentioned the Monkey Dock, which has an assessed value of 700,000, when in reality,
Went up a lot.
It's gone up, but still not what I would call fair
well,
market.
I was pitched the property for $12 million. Now that's the business too, in all fairness, but there's just no way that there, so we have a year to suss this out. And right now, if the bill has been chopped in half for the CCA and the Rauschenberg Foundation, I mean, the CCA charges membership fees. It's a non-for-profit, but they still generate income.
Let's not confuse the matter by bringing them
Yeah.
in. Let's stay focused.
Well, no, what I'm saying is we have time to make decisions. And, what will make a lot of decision is how the community acts for more spaces, for either parking, so we get more benefits. So the beauty is we have over a year to make final decisions.
We do, but I think that we could go with a higher number with the tentative apportionment for commercial properties, and then they have a year to make the argument why it's not appropriate. As
Really,
opposed to the reverse.
Oh, you can't, but why? That's just optics. You mean, we
Well,
can.
usually the tentative is trying to be the highest and best ability that we have today to set assessments out
So
there.
do you have a suggestion for that?
Yeah, are we gonna change the millage then? Is that what you're recommending?
I am, but I would also say that I'm trying to understand the chart that was just there. You're saying a bunch of residential properties became commercial on that chart as well? Daniel, can you? The
Okay,
left
so
column is as is, and then the right is moved to commercial.
correct.
Mike, before you walked in,
Yeah.
there's a $200,000 delta if we allow Rauschenberg property and the Civic Association property to go down to residential. So
Right.
there's $200,000 less that has to be assessed to all the residential.
And what I'm saying is I'm It's not a significant number. I'm perfectly comfortable with what the board decides overall. I just explained the precedent that had been established only the last time
Right,
on that. But what I'm more concerned with is that there's very high value, market value that's not being captured by the commercial property appraisal.
right. Well,
But then, hold on, let me try to
Yeah.
understand this chart, because the left column, all that stuff, I assume that the sum of the lower section left column matches the one on the right. It's just that it's moved to a different category. I don't know if that's
Correct.
well,
Okay.
here's a very
Renee,
simple
let me finish,
question.
please. Let me
I
please.
thought you were.
No, I
Go
wasn't.
ahead. All right,
I
go
was
ahead.
mid-breath. Anyway, the question is, what is the total? Does this add up to the total amount of assessment that's going to commercial properties? Which would be basically about 6 million and change, if I read this correctly. Daniel?
That should be the local cost share. Everything
That would be
calculated
the local cost share.
minus the storm protection. This is only the recreational category.
So 6 million out of what total number for recreational that includes residential and homesteading? In other words, what percentage of it, leaving storm damage out, just dealing with the, what is it?
So this is based on roughly about $9 million local cost share. So you're looking at about 66% of
It's
it's
going to commercial.
is recreational. The commercial portion of that is the 1.405. So they're paying about 25% of the recreational percentage. The residential properties themselves are paying 4 out of 6, so 66% in total.
So I'm saying, I guess I'm having a little trouble understanding the bottom two lines where the residential side of that and the homestead residential is not really moving to commercial.
Right, those are as is, but with the total number of properties. And so when we add the property values of the institutional properties, which a lot of the Rauschenberg properties have a higher just value, it reduces the millage rate for the residential properties.
Yeah.
Without those institutional properties being added to the residential category, the residential properties would have a 3.7559 millage rate.
If I can, I think I got it. So what it really reads is that the highlighted estimated assessment totals for the institutional properties which have been moved to the commercial category changes all of these other categories. That's basically what you're saying, right? Because I wasn't really reading it. I was reading it as residential properties moved to commercial, but this is strictly, I understand what you're saying there now. I would say for purposes of going forward, if we can get to Dr. Strong and get a better example, I would say that commercial properties should be paying at least 50% of the recreational charges.
So that number was based off of his economic benefit analysis report,
Yes.
which I'm not sure if you guys are able to see that on the screen. I'm still learning. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is based off the 12.4% of the total project benefits and recreation. That's based off of his study.
Yes, and I understand that. And what I'm saying is the board in its discretion has the authority to address these things. And I'm suggesting that we say that we increase the millage rate to reflect so that commercial properties are paying at least half the recreational benefits that are accruing from the renourishment. And that we put that out there in the tentative apportionment. And then, as Renee says, we have a year to tweak it.
Sure.
I think that he's given examples and others have given examples in communities where, you know, you have basically a resort that's paying the entire thing or significant portion of it. And our residential properties are saying they don't use the beach as much. And, you know, even if they're not homesteaded. So I'm simply making a suggestion that we arbitrarily do it unless Dr. Strong gets back to us. I asked him to look at this 2 months ago and try to come up with a different rationale. But I think that it's not sufficient. And I think the board, and I'm going to recommend to the board and make a motion that we increase it to represent at least 50% of the recreational benefits.
Understood. I just wanted to make sure we weren't trying to change that 70.6% in total for the recreation benefit. So understood.
Yeah, no, I'm not changing that. I mean, the storm protection is what it is. And I'm not touching that. I'm strictly dealing with recreational.
Understood.
And this is out of my, you know, my best thinking cap on and what it might be, but we'd have to come up with a better rationale. And that's what I asked Dr. Strong. And he did come up with one, which I'm not sure this reflects. So we have to ask him that. he realized the total base of commercial number he was using was lower than he could be using. And I don't remember why. He can explain it. He gave us a memo on it. I just don't have it handy. So anyway, I don't want to belabor it in this meeting, but that's my thinking, is that to be more fair to the people of Captiva, who are paying right out of the gate substantially more property taxes, because for God only knows the reason, the commercial property appraiser way undervalues commercial properties on Captiva. And I can prove that, I can pull out property after property. The Mucky Duck was one example. And even after they reassessed it, Daniel, I think you said it was going to go from 750,000 up to $1 million and change, $1.25 million or something.
I can look and see what it is right
You don't
now.
need to. I mean, it went up, but it didn't
Sure,
go
just
up
to go.
commensurate with the surrounding residential properties. And
So
the
it's
property appraiser is
properties?
supposed to be assessing these properties at their highest and best use.
Understood. It's 2 properties currently, and the total of the 2 of them is valued at roughly 2.5 million.
The Mucky Duck properties.
Correct.
Okay, so they went from 750 to 2.5. One of the 2 properties on the beach is equivalent to one resident had reached out to me. You know her, Renee. She lives a couple of doors away. She owns the old Rauschenberg property, and that was assessed at something like $5 million or more. And others on that same line within 100 feet or 200 feet of the Mucky Duck property were assessed, in excess of $5 million. Daniel, you looked at those once before, because that was a sort of a poster child situation. I don't remember the numbers, but it was significantly different. So I think in the interest of being fair to the residents and the property owners, we should exercise our authority to assess commercial properties differently.
Well, based on their actual value minus the cost of sale. In other words, if the same lick of land is 5 million right next door to the Mucky Duck, why they, assessed at 5?
Renee, another example I saw is that Andreas Vieri, who owned the Green Flag, I don't think he does anymore, but he owned 2 properties at the last project on Merman Lane. The 2 properties were combined to make 1 property, and the one property got assessed last time I looked at it, which is maybe 2018, 2019, at less than the sum of the 2 properties back in the last project. So for some reason, there's, they're either hiring the right assessor to go in and get these things changed, but something's happening. But that makes no sense that 2 residential properties on Merman Lane combined into 1, and the value drops below one of the 2 before. It's much less than the 2 together, but it's much below one of the 2. And that's not what has happened with real estate. I'm just saying this example after example after example.
Well, you've offered a solution, but how do we integrate that number into the ad valorem? Because I would back that solution.
No, we don't. We do it through the millage rate, that we basically think of it as, an excise or
Right.
an equitable approach to getting commercial properties to pay their fair share.
But when we do the proposed ad valorem, that's sort of the big element that we can add. But how do we actually integrate it in the proposed ad valorem? So
Well, for
that we're
argument's
ready to
sake,
vote on it.
you look at, in order to come up with an equal amount with residential, we need to adjust the millage rate. So Daniel's got to come up with a way to, add 50% to the millage rate or whatever it is to equalize it. I mean, let's not get into the hows of it now. Daniel's going to take.
For the purposes of our meeting on Monday, what we're trying to get done there is to approve the tentative apportionment. And as both of you have mentioned, we have time to finalize it. So I don't want to get into trying to research any of this with Dr. Strong until after our Monday meeting, if you're okay with it.
I'm not. I will vote against them on the Monday meeting if we don't make an adjustment for the commercial. Simply because I'd rather have the higher number out there and let the commercial properties come back and justify why it's not appropriate, why we violated the rules or whatever, than the other way around.
Well,
I'm just telling you, that's my perspective. I've mentioned this to you several times before. I talked to Dr. Strong about it. I'd asked him to come up with an approach. That's my sense. I see a lot of examples of unfairness in the way that the commercial properties are assessed, and we need to get them to pay their fair share of the beach nourishment. So I think that's the best way to go about doing it.
Dan, will you have time to get a hold of Dr. Strong to
come up with a new method of assessment?
Well, Dan, if you can't, I mean, you can try that, but if you can't, why not just say,
Well,
if they're paying half the recreational benefit for the island, what millage rate number would you have to change in order to be able to get this to come up with an equal assessment for commercial as for residential?
Well, I
Yeah.
think if you guys can see the spreadsheet that's on my screen right now, I've tried to start to share. And I
Tell me
zoomed
where to
in.
look.
The project benefit percentage, right? I just highlighted a few cells.
Yeah, I see it, yeah.
Okay, so this bottom one here is the overall project benefit percentage for commercial properties in the recreational category. So if we increase that and proportionately decrease the residential one that's 2 cells above it, that would assign them a higher, benefit to the project. But I definitely had to talk to Dr. Strong about it because I don't want to invalidate his whole study.
The other issue is we already have the resolutions written. So I mean, this is, I don't
Well, I
know.
would change those two numbers and make them equal and see what the outcome is, and then let the board discuss it regardless of what the actual wording is. Has this gone out to the public already? Is that what you're saying?
These numbers are the ones that the mailings went out to the residents using.
Yeah. Well, I believe we have the authority as the board to tweak this appropriately, and then if it gets challenged, it gets challenged in the next, year before the final is done. So anyway, I said my
why
piece.
can't
I said
we
my piece.
just
That's what I would
tweak them
vote
when we
for.
have time and do it right?
Well, but yeah, I mean, my recommendation would be flipped. It would be that we approve the tentative apportionment as the way we were directed to do it by the board based on our board meetings. And then we can go back and really dig into the details after, because to me, our resolutions have been done. Yes, we can always change the wording the day of, but our bank loan, dovetails into this after, because the bank loan is based on the tentative apportionment model that we've been directed to create by the board as a whole.
Well, the bank loan is basically requires us to approve a tentative apportionment. It doesn't get into the specifics of what the tentative, it just has to be within the statutory requirements of having approved a tentative apportionment. The
Right,
board
so
maintains the authority to decide what those numbers are.
I know,
Anyway,
but-
I've said my piece. I would recommend that we make the change because the inertia is there. If we don't do it now, it's going to be very hard to do it over the next year.
Dan, well,
So Mike, I'm in agreement.
what?
Excuse me, Mike, I'm in agreement, but the thing is, in order to implement it, it's like, how do we implement it by Monday? Is there something you can talk with Dan over the weekend and help him out so that we have
Yes, but
something
Dan
that
just
we
kind of
can
showed us
change
the
around?
way. He just kind of showed us the way, which is to tweak that number of the benefits that accrue. He just says he can't tie it back.
Okay, so let's say we do, my reception is just awful.
Well, look,
It's the story.
I've spoken my piece. You got to do what you got to do.
Well, I don't know the legalities of all this, because my concern is, are we gonna have to re-advertise the meeting? Are we gonna have to redo letters, Dan? Are we gonna have to, I mean, those are all, this is late. And I don't know that.
Oh, I have brought it up. I'll be honest with you. I have brought it up to you several times. The last couple of times I brought it up, and I told you I brought it up to Dr. Strong about a month or so ago. And it's an issue that's been raised several times about the inaccuracies of the work that's being done by the property appraiser. So this
Right,
is
but that's not within our control. So.
I know that, but it is within our control to assess in fairness. Okay, it is within our control to say that we think that the property appraiser is not properly allocating the cost, and therefore we're going to have to make this adjustment. That is within our control. We don't set. I'm not saying change the property values. I'm simply saying change the millage rate based on the fact that we're trying to create a parity between residential and commercial.
I would need to talk to Ralph. I don't know. I wish Ralph.
Okay, but all right, but I have a solution. The old adage, it's better to beg forgiveness and ask permission. Mike, I have no problem after we give a tentative apportionment as is to let them be, to have a surprise and say, hey, you guys are under, your millage is wrong, and we corrected it for this beach renourishment,
And that's what I'm.
and just take the hit. So I'm just saying, so we move on, and then we, it's just maybe optically it's going to hurt a little, but so what? So I'm just saying, Monday, which is in 3 days, we have to have everything in a row, unless between now and Monday, Strong actually, they find him and he's able to add something there. But I really don't understand how we can make this change by Monday versus make a real change after Monday. And yes, there'll be some surprises, but c'est la vie.
Well, I think Dan just showed us that we would do it on that one chart that shows the benefit.
I agree, but can we make that change and not send out anything and not have to procrastinate anything or delay anything? Does anyone know? Jennifer?
I don't think we can, and I think my concern with that again is, Dan, you said you sent that spreadsheet out, right? That little.
Well, the spreadsheet, not necessarily, but the letters that were sent to the property owners were based off of those numbers. And the concern that I have is without any specific, board direction to specify a reduction or a reduction to the residential properties, just tying it back to this document, because this document's also what ties into the county's interlocal agreement.
I'll make my position clear. We need to move ahead with the tentative portion. Any changes we'll do later. I am not going to support any changes to what we're talking about. I appreciate Mike's point, but the problem is, I thought, my understanding is we agreed we will look at the property assessments, and that's what we're going to go on. And if we want to make adjustments later, that's fine. Quite frankly, Mike, fairness is in the eye of the beholder. And what some people might think is fair and other people might think is unfair, we can discuss later, but we need to move ahead with the tentative portion. End of story. Let's get it out the door on Monday, and then we move on to other choices.
In my position,
I
will vote against it.
Trying to scramble on the weekend to get some new assessment, new views is ridiculous, quite frankly. We don't have the time for that.
Well, with all due respect, there's several months now since it's been brought up, John.
We cannot tie this up with endless arguments about what or what not is appropriate. So I will not support any move to delay the tentative portion. It goes out. We're going to vote on Monday. We vote in favor of it on Monday, and let's move on with our lives. This is not getting us anywhere.
John, with all due respect, it's several months now since I brought this issue up a couple of times. Others have brought it up as well. Jennifer, I spoke to you specifically and said, I talked to Dr. Strong. We should be changing this and trying to find a way to create some parity. And we had some prime examples with Mucky Duck and others to show that we were not reaping the right kind of contribution on recreational benefits from the commercial property. So that's fine. I'm happy to close this conversation right now. And I will tell you that if a change is not made at the Monday meeting, I'm going to vote against it.
Well,
It's fine, as long as we can change it. What's the difference? We can change it after.
I hear what you're saying, and I know you said all that to me, but it was my understanding from the direction of this board during one of our last meetings where it was said by several of you up there that we're not in control of the property appraiser's value, and that's what we're justifying some of these numbers on. And again, I just text Ralph as we were talking, because I'm pretty sure we can't make a change because that would involve the letters re-advertising, and as Commissioner Sylvia said, I don't think we have time to do that.
And Mike, I will certainly support you in terms of having a re-examination before the final portion is done. And as I understand Renee's comment, with respect to the Outer Banks, it is perfectly, I guess, with precedent, or again, Rafe can tell us legally that we can have a special excise with respect to the difference between the property tax assessment and the business value of a piece of property. So, I can support some further examinations after we get the tentative portion out, and I certainly can support I think Renee's idea that we should examine some kind of an excise sometime in the future.
May I ask who's going to be at Monday's meeting? Are all the board members going to be there?
Yes.
Okay, so then let's move on and we'll just resolve it. in
I'll be
Monday.
there.
Okay. All right,
Yeah,
so,
right. Okay.
the next, so we'll have a resolution for the tenant apportionment. Then we will have a resolution for the bank loan. Mark Raymond, our bond attorney, will be there. He will present, go through the details. After that meeting and hopefully the approval, then we will close on the loan the very next day. We'll have all the documents ready, teed up in DocuSign to be sent out to myself and the secretary, who has to actually sign the loan documents as well. I'm gonna get into now Aptum. I'm gonna have Nicole, if you want to kind of talk about, we have to approve the construction administrative services proposal, and it's about $449,000. And it's their administrative support. It lines up to what we spent last time on the project, maybe a little bit more. Nicole, do you want to add to that?
Yes, so this is our proposal to be performing the construction administration services. We're currently on the island right now, overseeing the contractor, overseeing their survey, watching the quality of the sand, just total operations to make sure that they're in compliance with the permit. So we have 2 engineers, Erica and Chelsea, out on the island, and then Tom and I are assisting with the upper level construction management portion of the project with Great Lakes. So we've been discussing the implementation of the dunes along the island with them, just coordinating day-to-day things, getting the appropriate checklist ready for the agencies, the startup. The proposal also includes any required post-construction reporting and certification. Excuse me. And then we also have the required post-construction survey and monitor and report associated with the project. So a lot of these things within the proposal are permit required. And also it's nothing different than we've done on the island for the past 2 projects, the 05-06 project and also the 2013 project. So it's very consistent, providing you guys with, construction observer out there daily to be your eyes and ears on the beach, help relay any information to Jen and Dan so they can bring it back to the board. Also, just making sure no issues arise. And if they do, we can be out there quickly to address them and remedy the situation.
That's updated. Okay, awesome. Thank you. So with that said, Nicole and Tom, I'm going to let you go right on into the sand volume change order that we have been discussing. We have also updated Chairman Maville on it. So if you could just kind of give a brief overview of that, because that will also require a vote and support for the additional sand needed.
Sure. So we have been coordinating with both Jennifer, Daniel, and Chairman Maville on the sand volume. So initially, when we went out to bid, we had about 600,000 cubic yards in the bid form. But as we've reiterated a few times to the board, we did get a very competitive unit price of sand. So the contract allows us to edit that volume without the contractor adjusting the unit price of sand by up or down by 25%. However, when we went out there and did the pre-construction survey right before construction was to commence in August, we did note that there was a lot of impacts to the project area from a few storms that hit. I believe it was 4 storms that passed. And I think, as you live on the island, you can see that the upland of the beach, the dunes really were impacted. And we lost about, Tom, do you have the quantity? I don't have it right in front of me, but it was it close to 100,000 cubic yards of sand?
Hi, sorry, I was fighting with my mute button. I'm clear now. Yes, it was based on the pre-construction surveys that were collected. The volume indicated that there was an additional 200,000 cubic yards of capacity under the construction plan template based on just the changes of the beach from October 2020 through the collection of the pre-con survey, which I think was at the end of July 2021. And so that would bring the construction volume per the contracted template from 600,000 cubic yards to around 800,000 cubic yards. And then on top of that, we also did some evaluation of the dune impacts and dune reconstruction efforts, and found that there, could be upwards of 5 cubic yards per linear foot dune construction that can be installed as part of this project, which we believe is important and has been previously supported by the board. And if you take that volume number, it's just an estimate. We're doing surveys as the construction's going on. But you take that 5 cubic yards per foot, multiply it by the length of the island, that's approximately 125,000 additional cubic yards. So you start with the 600,000 that's in the bid, increase it by 200 to get to just the changes to the beach under the existing template. That's 800,000 total. And then you add some estimated quantity for upper erosion and dune reconstruction. And we were somewhere around the number of 925,000 cubic yards, I believe, which, by the way, was very close to the number that was in the engineering report that we completed in 2018. I believe the estimate way back when was 900,000 cubic yards. So this isn't an unusual or unexpected thing. It's just the way erosion works and how beaches change over time.
Okay, good. Thank you. So we will be looking to get approval on that, right? And it will become in the form of a change order, and the cost of the price per yard of sand is the same, correct?
Yes, so there's a couple of steps we need to take. As Nicole described, the contract already allows for you to adjust up to 750,000 cubic yards without any, you don't even have to talk to the contractor. You just tell them to do it, and it's in the contract. However, since we're pretty much acknowledging that we're going to go over that amount, we've had some informal discussions with the contractor, and they've indicated that because they're already there, they're already set up, things are going well, they're pumping sand, they're on schedule, or even, they're basically on schedule for what they had predicted, that they could place the extra sand without any increase to the unit price. Obviously, the total price will come up because we're adding more units, but the unit price they're willing to hold. Now that, to be fair, that is a discussion kind of with staff on the ground, but the guy that we've been talking to, he's been working for Great Lakes for 20 years. He's got a pretty good sense of what they'll approve at the management level, and I don't think he would go out on the limb like that without having some assurance of his own. But we do need to codify that in a formal change order, which is what Jen was just talking about. There'll need to be a written change order to the contract to formally increase the volume from the 600,000 cubic yards to.
Excuse me, well, I went first. So this takes place Monday. We can't do that now. This takes place Monday. Is that correct?
Yes, because you'll need a formal
you.
vote. Obviously.
Yeah.
as
Sorry,
Tom
Mike. I
mentioned,
just
the
wanted.
price of the total project will increase.
My question, Tom.
My question, Tom, is what
I
is
believe
our
I had a question here,
Are we going to
John.
need more sand over what you estimated, and or that the price per unit will increase? What are our risks here?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of your question. I think there were two
So
people talking.
so basically, you said this is within the change order proposal. What's the risk that this is not the final change, and that we have to put more sand and or the unit price goes up? Because I certainly don't want to be in a position that we vote for formal change, and all of a sudden, a month or two later, now we have another change. And that's not very good.
I understand. Let me answer it in a stepwise fashion. In a couple months, the whole project should be done. But there's always risk because of the potential of storms. We're like literally in the peak of hurricane season. So that's really the risk that we have from that regard, is that if a storm comes in and drastically changes the beach, we could have an adjustment in volume that occurs because of a storm impact. Obviously, we would deal with that, on an emergency basis if that really did happen. But in terms of projecting the volume, what I think you'll be asked for at your board meeting on Monday is kind of a not to exceed amount. And whether that's a volume number or a actual dollar amount is up to you all, of course, how you want to handle that. We're making a recommendation that we don't think there's a need above 925,000 cubic yards. And we may not even get to that amount. It all depends on the actual conditions of the beach when we get up, to the rest of the project area. We've only constructed a very small portion right now. So far things are on track, but we're finding these need for extra sand. So we're projecting those observations forward and coming up with this estimated volume of 925,000 cubic yards, which again is in line with the previous engineering that was done. And I don't see a need right now to go above that amount unless we have a major storm. Does that
I'd like to bring my question up because I think it sheds light on the issue that John raised. But when you calculate the price per cubic yard, which was what, roughly $16 or something like that?
I believe so.
That includes the cost of mobilization in there, correct?
No, it does not.
Does not?
No.
Okay, so that's just the cost of the digging and everything else. Mobilization is a separate one-time charge on top of it?
Yep, separate line item. Yes.
Okay. So I guess my question is, if they're here already, they're not paying for the materials out there they're digging. I just didn't understand why there would be an increase possibility. You think that the likelihood is not, but I'm just wondering, why would there be? If there's a storm or something else, I can appreciate that. That's a significant change. But without a change of that nature, I would think that keeping the price and even lowering it is a probability.
Yes, you're right, Mike. I mean, typically the price per cubic yard would remain the same because the contractor's sunk cost is already done. They're there. The cheapest sand to pump is the sand they're currently pumping, right?
Right.
The things that could potentially change those prices, if for example, we the layout, the design layout adjustment that we were to give them was lopsided, meaning that the bulk of this extra sand was at the furthest end of the pipeline. Say we put it all at the north end of the island, which we're not going to do, but just for a hypothetical, then it costs them more to pump further. So if it's a disproportionate amount of sand at the furthest extents that they weren't anticipating, that could cost them more money and justify a price increase. This is relatively uniform increase across the whole island, and that's why I think there's no issue from that regard. The other, one other thing, Nicole, sorry, is that they could also be up against a schedule issue where they're supposed to be somewhere else, and that has price implications for them too. I haven't heard that either. Sorry, Nicole, go ahead.
No, I was going to mention the schedule item that if they were, at a hard start at a certain date on another project, that's where they could potentially increase the unit price. But we did ask, and they said this project fits very well into their schedule, and they don't see any schedule impacts at this time either.
So if we agree to go to, excuse me, Mike.
I never finished my point, okay?
Oh, come on,
Back to
can we
John's
take
point.
turns, please?
I said it would shed light on
Please.
John's point. John is saying he doesn't want to approve something that might be subject to change based on factors. It sounds like the factors are unusual factors of, a delay because of a storm or whatever, but everything else being the same, we can approve it subject to other special contingencies occurring. So John, does that address your question? We can approve it based on what we know now, and if there are other factors that change, we'll deal with it.
All right, so my turn. Look, John, the only surprise can be is if there's a super duper hurricane that comes and wipes out all the sand. They're here now, they're gonna charge $16 a yard, and they're agreeing to, verbally. And so my question is to Thomas and Nicole, should we approve, and I'm 100% for it, should we approve on Monday? Do we get a signature on Monday that everything is good to go, there's no surprises?
If I had a vote, I would approve.
No, no, Mike.
Yeah, and not
Let's
with
say
any storm and other factors, the answer is yes.
Well, no, yeah, so Great Lakes will accept the change order as we're assuming they will accept it with just the charge for the extra yardage.
So once the board votes yes, move forward with the not to exceed amount or not to exceed
Right.
volume, then
Right.
we will, after you vote, we'll call up Great Lakes, say, this is what we're doing. Tom and I will draft up a change order for your review, get it to Great Lakes, and we'd like
Right.
to get it implemented within probably that week, if feasible.
Oh, I was hoping an hour. Once they signed it, then we're good to
It might
go.
have to go up their corporate chain a little
Yeah.
bit. but-
Okay.
So do we
so-
want to include, Chairman Bill, do we want to include then, we also want to add, to increase the sand volume by what the engineers recommend and
Right.
at a not to exceed price of $3 million?
No, we're just gonna go with yardage, no? I mean, I would even say.
How do we lose by going with the not to exceed? That solves the problem, puts the dollar.
I was
amount-
gonna say not to exceed 1 million yards versus 925.
I
but
was
that's
just
me.
gonna
So she was saying
Can I
a
make a
price.
suggestion?
What?
I'm sorry, because in addition to the additional yardage of sand, we're adding dunes and plantings, so it may be, easier to just do not to exceed dollar amount, because we can include the sand and the plantings.
Okay.
Yeah, do we have a price for the additional planting?
If it
Was
holds
it-
steady, they're 95 cents a piece.
Yeah, any idea? It's like 70 grand more in planting?
I don't
Anyone know?
know. I have to ask. them.
Nicole?
So it will really depend once we start seeing what amount of dune we're building on the south end. We can probably prorate that to the north end and get a better idea of the
Okay.
area of vegetation.
Right,
But if we
fair
do
enough.
a not to exceed cost, that would allow us to have that flexibility to better analyze the density of the dune plantings required to put it on top of the newly constructed dunes.
Okay, well,
Because
I'll
the
go
dunes are
whatever
really
the-
being
yeah,
field constructed.
Right, and I'll go whatever the board wants to do. I just don't,
Jennifer,
I
I
want
thought
to
you made
create
an
any
astute
roadblocks.
recommendation. What was the dollar amount, though, that you said in your
I
recommendation?
said a not to exceed 3 million because if we calculate the additional 175,000 cubic yards of sand that we're needing and you multiply that times 16, that's 2.8 million. So if we do an additional 200,000, then maybe that would encompass be enough for the dune vegetation.
Yeah, that's plenty of room. But Nicole, by Monday, could give us a number to make sure we're, not cutting.
Yeah, I just want to make
Yeah.
sure
We can give you a ballpark number for sure.
Okay,
Okay.
then
Jennifer,
we
I'm
will
trying to
pick up
understand
all.
your recommendation, which I think is the right way to go. But
Right.
does the contractor do the plantings and the dune work, or are we getting somebody separate for that? I'm just,
So the contractor is building the dunes with sand, and then he has a subcontractor that will come in and plant the dunes with the dune vegetation.
right. So the extra 200,000 we're giving him is going to encompass as much sand as we think we want to increase it at the price per cubic yard, plus money for the dunes and whatever. And you think that that's more than adequate? Is that correct?
I got a little lost in all the numbers that were being thrown around because the bid quantity is 600,000 cubic yards plus a variance. And I think the baseline we were talking about was an $18 million project, which would be 750,000 cubic yards. And then the 3 million on top of that, Jen, is that right? Is that where you were?
yes,
Yeah,
that was 3 million on top of the 18 million. So taking into account the additional volume that we would need times 16.
I stole the screen. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm putting it up on the screen here. So the top is as it is with 750,000 cubic yards of sand. And down here, if we add that up to 925,000 cubic yards of sand, and I don't know how many plantings, I put it to 300,000 from 75, but it would increase the total price of the project by 3,013,000. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, so when Nicole, when you get us the plantings total, then I will put the not to exceed rate into the script for Chairman Maville.
And then just so I understand, what you'll be asking the board for on Monday is approval for staff to negotiate a change order with the contractor for additional sand and vegetative plantings up to some not to exceed dollar amount, right?
Yes, and that's mainly, as I think Commissioner Mullen said, that recommendation just comes from, we know that the public will ask us, so we're just gonna put it out there and
Right.
where they can ask.
And Mr. Seville, to go back to your question, by wording it that way, in other words, giving the staff the authority to handle the negotiation up to some not to exceed limit, it avoids us having to come back to you again for any other little things that might change over the next month or two absent the major storm.
Okay. think he's saying yes. All right, so we're clear on that? I want to move on.
I have a question.
Yes, Jason.
On the spreadsheet that was originally up, it looked like an initial cost of 3.275 million before the bond money comes. Is that correct?
On the flow of funds, you mean? The flow of funds spreadsheet that we had up just a second ago?
Not the one that was just up, the one that was up prior to that.
The one John
Okay.
had up.
Yeah, this one.
I'll share it in just a second.
Hang on, we're gonna share it.
Pull it back up.
Is Raycom?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, Ralph.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, on the bottom there, total estimated due before bond, 3.274.
Yeah,
Okay. We're gonna have a signer get a hold of Fifth Third Bank to move money to Bank of the Islands and possibly cash out the CD from Sanibel Captiva Bank to cover that.
okay. So then we would need Renee, our chairman Bill, to be able to sign that so we can move the money to get this paid, correct? Is that what you're saying?
Is he a signer on the account? I thought it was just Dick and you.
Oh, okay.
If you're able to do it, then.
I don't recall that. I only remember going to, well, yeah, maybe, actually, you're right. Because I think when I started, we did a DocuSign. So yes, we'll look, I'll have John look into that and we'll get that teed up today and tomorrow. Because we'll have to have it then prior to the approval for Monday, is what you're saying, Jason?
Just prior to whenever
It's
the
due.
bill is due.
When will, do you know when it will be due, Nicole? Or Tom, do you know? when
Yeah.
it's due?
Hi, this is Tom. Nicole's on mute. One of the, I'm not sure what this balance sheet is that we're looking at here in terms of cash flow, but we heard on our progress call today that the contractor is poised to submit their first invoice, which will be 60% of the mobilization plus some other ancillary items. And I'm trying to look up in my records right now what that might be, unless you have that handy, Nicole.
I'm
This,
sorry, my internet went out a little bit, so I missed what the question
okay,
was.
so this is the flow of funds sheet. And
Mhm.
so what we're trying to determine is the 3.274 million that's estimated due before the bond. Does that include what we're going to have to give the contractor and you all? Or what is this flow of funds?
So the estimated flow of funds includes both the contractors, initial mobilization, and I believe we estimated 10,000 cubic yards of fill. And then it would also include any sea turtle monitoring that's being conducted. And then it estimated construction services, but as I talked with Chairman Maville, we did not have an executed agreement in place. So we're operating in good faith right now. So we really won't have that bill into you guys probably until October on that.
Okay, so then Jason, do you still think we need to go ahead and get this money transferred over?
Not if the bill won't be due until October. We should have the bond money by then, correct?
Well, wait.
Yeah.
So our construction admin, both Tom and I services, that bill won't be until October, but Great Lakes will be sending you a bill this week for their 60% of their mobilization. Are they including 10,000 cubic yards of fill, Tom?
No, I don't think so. But I don't think this is the right number. I have their bid open here. If I have the right one
Okay,
open.
I don't know where we got, did this spreadsheet come from you, Nicole? Where did the spreadsheet?
This was given to me from Dan. so-
Oh, from Dan. Dan, did we create this from Apton? Or did Erica help us with this?
This spreadsheet was sent over from Aptum, yes.
Okay.
See, yeah, they had the mobilization number on the right side there. GLDD construction bid is correct, 5.48 million. But when I take that number, make sure I'm doing this right, and multiply by 60%, I get 3.288, not 2.747. I'm not sure where that came from.
All right. So then,
It should be
Jason?
60% of that 5.48 number is what they're going to bill you. Plus, like I said, they did not mention any sand today, Nicole. They said they would withhold that. I think maybe they'll try to squeeze 10,000 cubic yards out of it, but I understood today that they would not. But they did say they would try to cover some other ancillary costs like turbidity monitoring, the sea turtle relocation. Well, they haven't started that yet.
Yeah.
Maybe some of the project site and layout and data collection things. They might try to recover some of that cost to pay their subs.
so then Jason, yes, I guess we do need to get this money transferred in TDA. So we'll work on that. John, can you work on that tomorrow? Thank you. Okay. All right, moving on.
Can I ask one other question on that? I'm sorry, but
No problem.
will you need board approval to pay Great Lakes first estimate? Because if you do, I don't know you might need to talk to Ralph how to handle that logistically with the board, but we don't want to wait a whole other month to pay them.
I don't think we need any approvals to
Okay.
pay for the project because I think all that was done. Ralph, you're on the call. Could you answer that question?
Since the project is already approved, in my opinion, don't need to go back to the board. The board knows what the project is and has approved the project and the expenditures.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, good. All right. Is that it on this topic? Yay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And I'll have John work with you, Jason, tomorrow on this, on getting that transferred.
Excuse me, Jennifer,
Yes.
forgive me for interrupting. I can no longer attend the meeting. I am kind of swamped here. Can I excuse myself, please?
Yes, fine. Call me later.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, bye, everybody. Thanks. Great
Bye.
job, everyone. Thank you.
So the next topic is we'll have the auditor engagement letter. That's just a formality.
We already agreed to a 3-year.
We already had agreed to a 3-year contract with them, so I just have to make sure that we have a motion to move ahead with this letter, engagement letter. And then the other issue, well, you don't have this.
We need the motion on Monday.
Yes, we're gonna need the motion on Monday in a second. The next topic after that is going to be with the previous administrator who claims that we still owe her $4,000. All of that paperwork is in your packet so that the board can go through. I'm looking at John Sylvia because he's the only board member I have left. You can go through and ascertain and determine what you would recommend. Then we will have the administrative report and of course the beach nourishment project update. Dan, do you want to?
This independent contract, that's page 139, is that right?
Yes.
Dan, do you want to talk a little bit about your Renourishment project update?
Sure. I mean, at last update from what I saw, they've completed approximately 4,500 or so linear feet of the beach. They've started constructing the dune with a 25-foot crest. It's, the beach is really looking great. I've got nothing but good things to say, especially about, I'm very thankful to, Tom and Nicole, as well as Erica and Chelsea have been great with helping out with any questions that we have and communicating to the dredger. And we continue to push out updates by social media as well as on our webpage. And if y'all haven't seen our webpage, I like to brag about it, but check it out. And we'll be having another walk ahead, I would project on Monday or Tuesday, and that'll be out where they flip the pipe and projecting northward from there.
Good, thank you. So I think that's pretty much it for that meeting. We will have, of course, our SECF update, helping Ryan or Kelly will be on the call to talk about the turtle and shorebird nesting and the monitoring and the sea level rise. Actually, she's called the Coastal Resiliency Manager. I'm going to change that. That they just hired. So he'll kind of give us that. We don't have any follow-up. So we're good on that. The next portion of this very brief meeting, Nicole and Tom, you're done. You don't have to be on the call anymore because we're going to talk about our budget. I only have one commissioner still left. We developed the budget with Jason, with our CPA.
Jennifer,
yes.
what page is the budget on?
Sorry, it's right down here at 159. So we did a pretty extensive PowerPoint last week for our budget workshop. And I'm gonna try to get this a little bit more streamlined before Monday because I really just want to hit the high points. And in fact, John, can you just show the actual spreadsheet of the budget recommendations? So we have our recommendations for our budget, which was to go back to the rollback millage, or to keep it the same, or to go sort of at a midpoint, one step above our current millage rate. And we were advised, staff was advised to create a budget that kept our millage rate at the same. And so during our trim meeting, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about getting the millage rate, what we want to do with the millage rate, because really it should just be an approval process. Is that correct, John?
Yes. So when we get to the actual hearing, let me share this agenda for you guys. So the commissioner or the chairman will read everything as follows. We'll discuss the millage rate, the percentage and increase of the millage rate over the rollback rate needed to fund the budget, and the reasons the revenues are increasing. After that, they'll discuss the millage rate because they have to pass the budget. I'm sorry, the millage rate before the budget, and then they'll discuss the budget resolution and vote on that. It all has to kind of go in that order. And when they're talking about the millage rate, they need to read the rollback rate, the increase on the rollback rate, and the full millage to be levied. This meeting.
You're going to write that script for Chairman
Yes,
Hill?
this meeting should be very quick as long as everyone is on the same page as to what millage rate we pass.
So what page are we on?
We were hoping to have a couple more commissioners still on the phone call.
Yeah, the problem is the commissioners don't all consistently show up, so it's very difficult to have commissioners of the whole meetings and discuss these things because I don't.
Is there any justification at all for the rollback?
No.
I would not say so.
I mean, other than
So
you
we
have,
skip that.
we
Okay, so
can.
then a minute.
Yeah, and then you can look at the current millage rate,
When you say current, you mean majority?
the current right now. What is our current
We would
millage rate?
sustain a millage rate of
0.4395.
Thank you, Jason. 0.4395, which would be our current millage rate. So if we want to carry through that, what that does, because the property value
Yeah, please,
increase,
let me know.
that gives us a 2.3% increase in our overall budget, which I think extrapolates out to be, and Jason help me out, an additional $23,000. Is that right?
And this,
Yes, that is correct.
So it's,
so this
go ahead.
budget is primarily for what?
This budget is our, Jason, do you want to kind of go through and explain where this increase would come in the general fund? How it would affect the general fund?
The general fund, the expected increases in the general fund for next year is primarily from payroll and wages. Did not have a full staff for the full year for the current fiscal year. The general fund is able to cover the tax revenue is able to cover all the expenses of the general fund and allows a surplus of over 300,000, most of which gets transferred over to the capital projects fund to cover future renourishment projects. A lot of the 3.3 million that we're going to be paying up front on the current project comes from overflow from the general fund.
But Jason, my understanding is that this is less than the rate of inflation. And that means that there is a real income reduction for the staff. Explain this to me.
It is lower than the rate of inflation if we stick with the same rate. But since there's a surplus in funds, it just decreases the surplus. Nobody would have to necessarily take a pay cut or anything.
A real pay cut or not?
No, so what do you
No
say?
pay cut. No.
Yeah, so I think the way to address this maybe, because again, I don't have all the commissioners who participated in this workshop last week or today. I'm left with one. I think the best way to address this is if we were to look at the 2/3. So if you looked at the millage rate of the 2/3, which is the 0.4725, which is 10%. And that is more than the rate of inflation, right? Because rate of inflation is 4.2. So I think maybe a way we could address this during a presentation is to talk about that, Mr. Sylvia. I mean, talk about that, John, about needing a 2/3. So if we need a 2/3, then that means we're going to have 3 out of the 5 commissioners, correct? 4 out of 5 commissioners that vote yes. Is that right?
Because the
Yes.
majority, the 3 out of 5 votes.
Do they have to be physically present, or can one be on?
Yes.
So I'm not gonna have that. 'Cause I'm not-
Well,
Okay.
we need it, like, we need at least a physical quorum like everything else, and then they can allow virtual attendance in the beginning.
So right now, the only person I have attending virtually is Mullins, that's 1. So that's if the rest of them show, correct?
Right.
Okay, so then the only way we can push that forward, Commissioner Sylvia, is if we have 4 out of the 5 of you present, and then you can talk about that concern. And Jason, then if we go up to the 2/3 majority vote with the 10% increase at a 0.4725 millage rate, what does that give us? Let me look. That gives us an additional, go over,
50,000.
thank you, additional 50,000, which would then more than cover the performance increases that I've proposed for the budget. Okay,
And
so-
the increase based on the Department of Labor's
So how
increase
do
in
we,
the average wage.
on Monday, how do we move forward on this?
See, that's the thing, Jason, I don't know how to move forward on this on Monday because, I mean, what am I suggesting? I showed them all this spreadsheet that showed the potential, what our budget would look like. And at the end of our last budget workshop, everybody was really fixated on the pie charts. So I'm not sure how to move this forward, actually, to be honest, because in my council meetings, we're having our tentative apportionment meeting at 5 o'clock today, our first trim meeting. And we already know what direction we gave to our city manager. We had 3 budget workshops and he knew what direction we all wanted to go. And I didn't get that same feedback. So I don't know what to suggest on Monday, Jason. Should I suggest the 2/3 0.475 millage increase that increases 10%?
Well,
So-
we can't get a vote on it.
Yeah, we'll have to get a vote. On Monday, I have to
Oh, no,
have
yeah, but you can't get a vote.
today.
You can't get a
Yeah, I
vote
think
on-
direction, so the hard part is, all that means is I have to write 3 resolutions because they have to be ready for the board on Monday
Well, and
to read off.
we may need to do that because
Yeah.
I have no direction. So Jason, what do you recommend? I do on Monday.
I would recommend the 0.4433, I think you're going to have a hard time getting the votes for the 0.4725
I was
since
afraid
the
of that.
millage increased so much 2 years ago.
Yeah,
And basically the only thing that the difference is covering is additional surplus to be used towards future renourishment projects
right.
5+ years down the road.
So do you see what you're saying, Commissioner Sylvia?
Yeah, but to me, I don't really care about increasing the surplus if we're shortchanging our workers. I mean, I don't want to do an Andrew Carnegie here, where I'm making a whole lot of profit by screwing the workers. So how do I make the workers whole? I mean, if we do 3.2%, do I really need to put money into surplus?
Well, you'll have surplus.
Wait, so I think.
I have a hard time hearing John.
I'm sorry. So the question that Commissioner Sylvia has is his concern about making the employees whole. Because his concern is that the rate of inflation is 4.2%, and we're only proposing a 3.2% increase. We need another percent. So his concern is about the projected performance increases that I put in the budget for staff. His concern is how we would cover it. And I think what you're saying, Jason, is we would cover it with the reserve, so the fund balance, right? The balance, the surplus revenue that we have. And
Okay.
yeah, we can do that,
Can you
right?
scroll to the bottom of the sheet?
Hold on, say that again, Jason.
Can you scroll to the bottom of the sheet?
Yes. Here?
Okay, yep. So if you look at the bottom line, the net income, that's all surplus. So there's plenty of money, even if we went with the rollback rate, to cover staff increases.
Okay, so then if we stay with the majority this year, then maybe next year, Commissioner Sylvia, our strategy could be to more look at in lining it with the rate of inflation.
So who makes the motion to go with the majority? Is that Renee has to do that?
Yes, Renee would make that motion.
So
Unless
Renee's
he doesn't
gonna
show
do it.
up. Sure.
I only asked the question. I didn't put anything.
No, I know. I mean, it's just, it's unfortunate. The only people that consistently come to these workshops are Chairman Novell and Commissioner Mullins and Commissioner Sylvia. So, okay, that's what we'll do then, Jason. We'll recommend that. Do you think I need to go through my budget presentation, my PowerPoint, before we take this vote?
May I ask?
Yes, yes.
Can we avoid what the objections about the pie chart? Do we need to not include that in the document, or are we going to end up with?
I made the changes.
Well, we made the
Jason-
change.
So we made the change.
Yeah,
Jason
John made the
sent me-
changes with Jason, so we have one pie chart for the general fund and one for the capital fund. So I can show that
So we're not going to get this.
into the weeds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because last time,
Okay.
That's,
one person objected.
and honestly, that's if we're able to get through the meeting fast enough to get to this point before the tentative trim hearing.
Which is what we're gonna try to do. Okay, all right, so Jason, is there any other feedback you want to give us before our Monday budget meeting?
In regards to doing the PowerPoint at the trim hearing, my opinion is we probably don't need to do that. It caused enough chaos at the last workshop. And basically all we're doing is deciding how much of a reserve we want to build each year. The general fund raises enough revenue to cover all administrative expenses, plus at least 300,000 to save towards future projects.
Okay,
We're going to avoid a sidetrack.
correct. So we're not gonna do the PowerPoint, we're just gonna go straight to the majority, recommended, keeping the current millage rate the same. Okay, that's good, that's good guidance, thank you.
And last year, the trim hearing lasted 3 minutes. I think it was similar to like what you described for the city.
Okay. Okay, that sounds good. All right, is there anything else that we need to talk about?
Are we going to have pizza on Monday?
Yeah, I'm gonna have food for everybody. So thank y'all for being here. Ralph, if you want to stay on, I can kind of go on. I can talk to you a little bit about what I text you about.
Okay, yeah, I'll stay on.
Okay, thank you.
I was just going to comment on the budget. You know, one thing to consider is with sea level rise and climate change, we're going to need projects more frequently and possibly additional projects of another nature. So, you know, that's something to keep in mind. I know we have time to build up the money, but there's probably going to be significantly more expenditures in the next, you know, decade or so. So it might be something to think about too.
We are anticipating that. I've got strategic planning teed up with your buddy Tom from UF.
Ray, I want to just make clear, again, my position that we really need to have control of this stuff. We can't just be a piggy bank for everybody else in the state of Florida. So that when we're talking about financing these projects, I really would like to have some very specific goals of what we're trying to achieve and what the deliverables of these projects are. Because to me, you can talk about sea level rise till the cows come home. And unless we put some quantitative numbers on this, I think it's going to be very difficult for us to control any spending.
One thing I'd also recommend everybody take a look at, just because it's so close to home, is Collier County and the Army Corps of Engineers just completed their resiliency project, and it has $1 billion price tag on it. And it's now turned out to be very anti-popular with the residents, because the project alternatives include building a 17-foot wall on the beach. And then there's another alternative of a 14-foot wall on the beach. And so the city of Naples came out against it. And I know the county commission of Collier is probably going to come out against it, even though it's a project, even though the county is a project partner with the Army Corps. They're now telling the Army Corps they don't want the project because of the social and economic impacts that it would cause by having a 17-foot wall built on the beach.
So the 17-foot wall, is that like where the berm would be, or like shoreline?
Like a
A
seawall.
17-foot wall landward of the mean high water line, but between the beach and the houses. And the people that are in the houses wouldn't be able to see, you know, the beach,
Right,
if they're under 17 feet. And it's kind of like a levee system. They proposed a levee system to wall off about, I don't know, 3 or 4 different areas of Collier County that they think are subject to storm surge and things. And it's kind of like setting up a levee system that they have in New Orleans, but using concrete walls. And that is so socially unpopular that they're now fighting their own project, fighting the project that they helped start up. They don't want the project anymore. So they want to stop the whole process.
So as far as Lee County goes, can we get ahead of this issue so that a study is not conducted and paid for, and then all of a sudden we don't like the results? Is there some way for people in Lee County, certainly not me because I have no political power, but someone?
Yeah, there was a mistake, I guess, that they made in the beginning, or maybe not a mistake, but an oversight, where it's been being pointed out now that what we should have really requested was a local project partner with the Army Corps. So if we go through this, what they call a local project partner path, then you have more say about what the engineers come up with for an engineering solution. Because you can imagine, if you tell the engineers, hey, you know, you're going to have these problems, how do you engineer a solution? They're going to come back with some pretty drastic engineering solutions that may not be socially acceptable to how people perceive the beach.
And we assume that you're in control of all this.
Yeah, we want to try to get out in front on it, because they're going to probably start using this.
You know, this all goes to strategic planning, because this district hasn't had it before. So once we get the strategic plan kind of off and going, then we can figure out like next steps in terms of coastal resiliency and sea level rise. I feel like, because you're absolutely right, Ralph. You know, what we do has to be consistent, and what is the will of the residents. So you'll be participating in our strategic planning, which we're going to be starting in October.
And you will keep all the blame.
Yep, it'll be all your fault. Just kidding. So just real quick, can we go back?
Are you all done with me?
Yes. Can we go back real quick to what I texted you about? So previously in this meeting, Commissioner Mullins had concerns regarding Dan's presentation. I don't know if you want to let Dan be able to share. And Dan, if you want to go through and kind of talk about Mike's concerns regarding the commercial not being charged enough millage.
Sure. Let me pull that presentation back up 1 second.
And you know, my point is that everybody thinks fairness is whatever it is.
Yeah.
So one person's idea of fair is not the same as another's. So it's a bucket of worms, and I would avoid it at all costs. But anyway,
Right.
you folks do what you want.
I'm looking at this on my iPhone, so it's a little hard to read. So you may have to explain some of it rather than counting
Yeah,
on
so
me to
Dan,
read
you just want to go through and kind of show him what Mike was
Yeah,
concerned about?
or just explain it, but you can put it up, but I'm not going to be able to read the actual numbers or
Okay.
words
So-
other than the headers.
So it's all about the
I can see
recreation.
that when you zoom in, I can see, yeah.
Okay, so it's all about the recreation benefit cost share portion of it.
Okay.
And Mike's of the belief that the commercial property should be paying much more than what they are in this model. These numbers were derived from Dr. Strong's study and are supported by hard numbers. And so I guess the problem that we're going to have is just changing these numbers is either going to change the overall annual benefit numbers. I don't know if you can still see right there. I'm trying to zoom in as much as possible. So if we increase the annual benefit number for the commercial,
Thank you again.
it will increase the project benefit percentage for the commercial, but that'll also skew the numbers from the Dr. Strong study, which is what's based upon the 70.6% recreation benefit that we submitted to the county for our interlocal agreement. So it may skew everything, and I don't think that we can just arbitrarily pick a number. I think we have to have some sort of numbers to support it.
Yeah, so, although I guess the way it's being presented to me now, and I didn't hear Mike's presentation, unfortunately, or questions, but I guess for the first thing that I think of in my mind while I'm hearing this is you don't want to just arbitrarily pick a number and then reverse engineer your way into that number. You want to start with, your rational basis and then work up to a number.
Right. But
So
more
I think you
importantly-
can't just say, I want to increase this number. You've got to start at the beginning and say, have a rational basis, what recreational benefit is being afforded to the commercial uses, what types of commercial uses are there that we're talking about. And, I can imagine there's hotels. Is that considered commercial?
Yes.
Hotel?
Yes.
So hotels have guests and the guests use beach, and that sounds like there's a recreational benefit. Some restaurants, I guess, if they're right on the beach, like Mucky Duck, there's probably some recreational benefit. People come to eat on the beach, see the beach, but other restaurants that are on the bayside, may not. So I don't know that,
So it all stems from the just
More
value.
importantly, what we're trying to ascertain is Mike wanted this all changed by Monday. The problem is that we've already sent out the letters, done the ad, everything based on what was recommended to us by the board previously. And yes, Mike had said there's got to be a way to increase the millage for these commercial properties, which, yes, we can absolutely look at, but I don't think we can do that for Monday's meeting because we've already noticed.
might be a little, maybe it's something you can look at for next year. And start early putting it together for next year, but it's kind of late in the game right now to go back and have to do everything,
Because we would have to resend
At
out
this
letters.
point in the game, I mean, it's conceivable, I guess, but there's a lot, that would entail a lot of work.
Yeah,
Well, I
You
think
have
she's
to have
asking not so
a
much from
rational
the-
basis that would be supportable in court would have to support the increase. You can't just look at the numbers and say that should go up $1 million and the residential go down $1 million. It has to all be,
I guess
That's-
the
yeah.
question more so, I'm sorry, Ralph, is so the letters that were sent out to the property owners had a specific, millage rate attached to them. And if that millage rate is changed, then we're presenting something at a meeting different from what we've mailed to the residents. And so we want.
yeah, I got my letter last week and I was wondering about, if the letters have gone out to the people in Captiva, but I assume they have. I've lived in Fort Myers, but I assume the Captiva people got their letters from the Lee County Property Appraiser or tax collector last week or the week before. So those have already gone out. I think, it may be something worth looking into. My understanding of why the numbers are so low for commercial is because the property appraiser apparently has numbers that don't reflect the actual real world comparable sales of properties on Captiva. They
Right.
seem to be undervalued by the property appraiser, but that's a property appraiser problem.
More so, we're just making sure, like, if we were to change the millage rates, it would invalidate our advertisement and we'd have to re-advertise and not take a vote in this meeting if we were to make any changes at this point, correct?
I think we would. I think that, Mike can advocate for that, but, I don't know if there's a majority to go back and do it all over again. So you may want to just let him present it on the table, suggest that we look at it next year to have more time and make sure that we do it correctly and that the commercial property owners are given sufficient notice, prior to all the notices being published. It's pretty late to start all over again now.
Yeah, I think one of the issues that maybe we need to have you call Mike, because he is wanting these changes done by Monday, or he's saying he's voting no.
I'm sorry, I missed the last couple of words. He's saying he's what?
Gonna vote no.
Okay, well, some people vote no. You don't always, you're gonna have a unanimous vote, so. Even if he votes no, you could still go and get the rest of the people and you'd still have the 2/3 or whatever you need. If you were to go to the higher budget, and I think we're talking about only needing
No,
3 out of 5 votes, right?
We're talking about not the general purpose.
We're talking about the tentative
the tentative
apportionment.
apportionment.
It doesn't matter. We know we can't change it legally because we've already sent all the notices out. And to change.
Oh, we're not talking about the trim, or this is about the project apportionment?
Correct.
Well, you can change those around, but it's going to be difficult. I would explain, as staff, why you think this is late in the game to try to change it.
We did.
Because we're relying on the strong report, and then hope you have enough votes. Votes that that would say let's defer that till next year.
Do we need more than 3 to pass the tentative apportionment? Do we need a 4 out of 5? Or do we just need a simple majority?
I have to go back and look. I don't know. I'm driving in the car right now. I thought we just needed a simple majority.
Okay.
I didn't see any special, you need a certain amount of votes. My understanding was just a majority as well. But
I think that's just for the other process that you talked about, the 2/3 vote and all that. So
Right.
I don't understand how you could possibly do all this by Monday. I mean, to me, that seems, it's already
Well,
Thursday
We've already
afternoon,
noticed.
2:45.
We've already noticed something else.
Yeah. We've already
You
noticed.
can't just change, I mean, it'd be easy enough to change a number in a table, but you got to have support for your change. And what is the support for the change? And that takes, probably a study and redoing the analysis.
Right, and a re-advertising within a certain amount of days before the board meeting, which we passed.
Explain to me again, I'm a little rusty. Tell me again what the recreational benefit is in, factual terms. What types of commercial uses are we talking about, and what is the practical recreational benefit for a commercial use. And maybe
So-
maybe you want to go back to Strong and if Mullins brings that up, bring that up at a meeting. This recreational benefit for commercial was set in the following way based on the following rationale. And then what would that be?
Trying to go to the actual study, but it was based upon strong surveys of the beachgoers, and then he attributed the annual benefit received by category, residential and commercial. And we've also since delineated to residential with homestead exemption based upon that study or that survey. But I think without, an
What did the
additional
survey say?
and-
Did the survey say something like, did you go, when you came to the beach, did you also go to a restaurant? When you came to the beach, did you also go to a beach swimsuit store? Did you also go to YOLO? Did you go to Doc Ford's? Did the survey say like what kind of businesses or commercial did you go to? Or did it say like, did you just come to the beach and go home? Or is that the rationale that he looked at? I just
Well, I
can't
think
remember.
it asked for their origin, where they're from, if they live on the island, if they're renters, if they're property owners, day trippers. And I think it assumes that if they're day trippers, then they also, shop the restaurants and the stores. And it just, I don't have. the
Okay,
study
at a
in
higher
front of me.
frequency than residents, I guess is saying.
Correct.
So they get some economic impact from having a bigger beach, a nicer beach, full beach. People will come to the beach and then they'll buy a soda or whatever. So
Mhm. And the commercial
I guess you-
properties have more than double, I think it's almost triple what the residential properties have in terms of millage in this proposed model. So I'm not sure, like.
I would start out with that. I'd say first, the commercial properties have double or triple or whatever the number figured out by Monday of the residential. To increase it further, we feel we would need some more data collection and support why the commercial are getting so much more of a recreational benefit, which you might be able to do, but it would take you time. You wouldn't be able to do it by Monday. You'd have to do it next year.
Right.
And then
so
the other
problem-
thing, then you might point out that there may be a undervaluation problem that's happening at the Lee County Property Appraiser's Office that is worth exploring.
And that's where the problem lies, is that they're saying that the property appraisers undervaluing the commercial properties. I don't think the issue is necessarily with the benefit percentage based upon the study, but more so the factor that the millage rate gets multiplied by is the property value, and that's something that we don't have control over. And I think it's beyond us to kind of come up with a formula to account for a perceived undervaluation without knowing the formula for the property appraiser, what they evaluate on.
I think, might start with an informal meeting to go to the property appraiser and maybe even have Mike go as a board representative and say, look, we've uncovered something what we think is undervaluation, and how are you doing these? What are you using for comps? We saw that there was a recent comp where I think one of the restaurants, I forget which one it was, sold for much more than the appraised value, like many millions more. So,
Yeah,
we might point those things out.
But that's also the sale of the business. It's not the sale of the property. They're wanting to value in how much money the business has a potential of making to add that to the value of the property. That's not like the value of the business.
Oh,
that's
that's not how that's not how the property appraiser does it, right?
Right, I know, that's the problem, is that they want to add somehow the value of the business to the value of the property. That's just not how it works.
But it does seem like that the properties that are commercial are undervalued, even if you just look at the land value alone, not even the structures.
Right.
So might be something that we could talk to them about. But that's, that's with,
And,
we would approach them like anybody else would approach them. It's within their ambit. If we see something, certainly we're allowed to go talk to them about it, but they're the decision makers on that.
Right. And they use Monkey Duck as an example all the time, but that's split into two lots. And that's why the value is kind of low.
Okay, well, I just wanted to double check with you to make sure we were too late in the game to send out new letters and, renotice the meeting and all of that. So we'll just move ahead and see what happens. And then, yes, Dan and I plan to meet with Dr. Strong and so we can come up with a number that isn't arbitrary. So
Yeah, I mean, we're just hanging on by the thin blade of grass, like the Irish saying, because we could barely get a quorum together to get this thing approved, but to have to go back and start all over again, we're really late. We don't want to postpone this process anymore.
Well, I don't know if he realizes if we don't get a pass on this Senate apportionment, we're not gonna get the loan and then we're gonna be sunk.
Yeah, it's too late. I mean, I would say, look, we have a loan document that's being approved today, as well as this apportionment. If the apportionment doesn't go forward today, then the loan is not going forward today, and we're going to run out of money real quick. And we're going to be on the hook for the remainder because we don't have a loan and we have an $18 million project to pay off.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Great job under pressure, you guys. The pressure and stress you guys deal with there is the most intense I've seen in any local government unit.
No, you haven't come to Cape Coral when we had our mask mandate. That was
I see it in Naples, but I heard you did a great job in Cape Coral. What was it on the interviews for the replacement of the council member?
Mhm. Yeah, we
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we got that process down because we've had to do it so much.
Yeah, they even called out you specifically, Jennifer, as an individual commissioner. Did a great job on that. So kudos to you as a.
Who called me out?
I think it was the Cape Coral Breeze. Something, people were talking about it. You did a great job.
Oh, thanks. All right, it's good practice for this. Yes.
Yes.
Well, thank you guys. So we'll see you all Monday, if not before.
Okay, bye.
All right, bye.
Oh, I'm gonna probably bring some loan documents and sign them and drop them off at the Captiva office tomorrow.
That's fine. No problem.
Hey, if it's Saturday, is there like a drop window? I could slide something through the glass door or something?
No. But
PO Box 365.
I can meet up with you if need be. I'll be in North Fort Myers Saturday midday in the morning. So if that works out, I can meet up and grab them from you.
Okay, or I could drop them off in your mailbox at Cape Coral too, or something like that. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, you can always take them to City Hall.
If you're out here when Miss Carol's out at the post office, she's really good about just getting stuff in our post office box too.
We just need to get a Dropbox installed at the office.
Yeah.
I'll tape it to the window at your office there.
Okay.
I don't know it's in the right place. Okay, bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.